Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of welding our inner and outer arch on our wonderful coupe. So if you watched the first part, which I assume you did, then you saw me cut out the outer arch, trim that to fit, so that now fits lovely, so that's ready to be welded on. And then I've just started trimming this inner arch, and I think that's where we left off. So this is the current state of play. I've got all this fitting nicely. All pretty happy with that, to be honest. And then I've trimmed back this arch, the original inner arch, to a nice clean metal, which it is pretty good, not too far up, thankfully. So, and then I've got this outer skin. I've fit and fettled this, so that fits great there. We just need to figure out where we're going to trim this. I've done an initial trim, if you can see, up there. But we need to obviously do a final trim because we want it to be butt welded, not overlapped. But down in this corner, there's a bit of grot lingering. As soon as I've got this panel, I figured I may as well replace it. So this needs a bit of trimming, and I actually need to remove the rusty metal. It's weird because the back side of it's clean, but the inside edge is pretty pitted and nasty. So again, just because I've got the panel, it seems silly not to do it properly. So we've got I think there's a couple of spot welds here, and then we can just start to prep that area. So we'll get that smashed, we'll smash through that, get that prepped, and then yeah, hopefully we can get it on and welded. Right, my peeps, we are pretty much ready to weld this inner skin in. This inside edge has all been cut out nicely to get rid of the rot. So we had this little piece here, I think it's like that. And you see it's pretty pitted and nasty, so because we had that on this piece, I figured I may as well put it in there. So that's now trimmed. I've trimmed this arch gap. All this needs sort of fettling into place as I actually weld it. But my plan of attack is, obviously I don't want to smash this on and find out it's in the slightly wrong angle, but I can't put the outer skin on with this held in place with magnets. So I'm going to put a handful of tacks on this inner skin, and then I can pull my magnets off, and then we'll put the outer skin on and just check the fitment, and if there's any tweaks, if this is too far tilted in or out or whatever, then we can obviously make those final adjustments. I don't think it's far out, to be honest. I think it's pretty much where it wants to be. Right, now that's sort of loosely tacked in place. Like I said, we've still got to do quite a bit of fettling here, just to get that all sitting right and happy. We've got the arch in place, which is kind of the main thing I wanted to check. So we are now going to grab our outer skin. So let's get that chucked on and see where we end up. So a few magnets on there, got that sort of roughly where it wants to land. And the inner arch skin seems happy. Seems like the actual inner skin is shorter, so it sits further into this than the outer, which is fine. So yeah, pretty happy with that, generally speaking. I think that all lines up pretty well. So my plan of attack now is get this inner skin fully seam welded, because that, I think, fitment wise is all happy. So that's going to take me a while. This metal from BMW, this inner skin seems thinner than the original panel. So I'm having to be really, really careful welding it, because obviously it wants to warp, or it's going to try and warp, you know, very easily. So just got to take our time and make sure we don't overdo that too quickly. So we'll just take our time with this, get this inner skin in. So yeah, I'll probably time lapse this and then bring you back in, and we'll have a look at what other prep we need to do before we put this outer arch on, because we will need to do a bit of weld through primer and stuff in places. And I'm also thinking I might trim the arch lip on the inner and the outer back, because obviously on a 36, when you run wider wheels, clearance is always an issue. Obviously this car's not going wide body, we're not putting over fenders in it, but it would be nice to have as much clearance as possible. And knowing that the passenger side is probably going to need an arch in it at some point, I think I might just make this one self-clearance it now, like before it all gets painted, which I think is a good idea myself. But yeah, obviously that means it's not going to be OEM, but most people who buy these cars or use them wants to modify them. So, and look, I'm restoring it to modify it anyway. So I think we can improve it, because if you look, you've got this massive factory arch lip, which seems a bit excessive. You know, if we can take, I don't know, half of that off. Most of the newer cars, if you ever worked on a newer car like an E90 or beyond, they all have virtually no arch lips anyway. So yeah, we're just going to copy that basically. Okay, so we're a good amount of progress on. So I've got all of that seam welded in. It's all welded into here. Lovely, lovely, lovely. All of this is done. I've just knocked off the top of the welds. I'm not going to flatten down. You're never going to see it, so there's no point. So just any high points I've just knocked back with a grinder. The only place I'm really going to put some effort in is just along here, because I think this, wherever my outer panel has gone, it needs to be pretty flush. So some of these are quite proud. There's a couple of bits there, so I'm gonna knock them down. I'll get more Dremel on that, I think. But yeah, generally pretty happy with that. So it's all welded. We've got a ton of stuff to clean up. Obviously on the back side of this, all the underseal where I've welded has got, you know, ignited. So that's gonna be fun tomorrow to get that cleaned up. But the main thing is the inner arch is now on and done. We can get a bit of weld through primer on there. Just to protect these edges. Obviously the back still needs addressing, but this will get the process started. So just a quick coating. Just to prevent any flash rusting on those areas. As I say, the rest of it I still need to go over, so we'll get onto that tomorrow. Anyway, I'm probably gonna rejoin you on the next day. It's now like 5 o'clock Tuesday, so I think tomorrow we'll get the inside of the arch cleaned up nicely, and yeah, make sure we get everything sealed and primed, make sure we don't get any flash rusting. So we've probably got a couple of hours just sorting that out, and then we can start figuring out how we're going to weld on the outer skin. And there is a little bit of the inner arch here to make good. I've cut out some of the rot. I might cut this return off. It's quite thick, this inner piece, like 2 mil. But yeah, this inner arch lip needs basically remaking from there down to there. It's the next day, so I've done a bit off camera just because it's grotty work that, you know, there's not really much to see, but I'll show you where I've got to. So I have cleaned up all of this, knocked back some of these higher welds that's on these parts here, just to make sure that this panel fits nicely on there, which it does. Let me show you that. There we go, that sits in there beautifully, so happy with that. So all of this is cleaned up. Anywhere I've welded, I have wire wheeled both sides to clean up any of the crap that you get as a byproduct of welding. So that's all done. Lovely, lovely, lovely. I've remade this inner arch lip. Pretty happy with that. That was just with some 1.5mm plate, because this inner panel is 1.5mm thick. So that's all done, just freehand. Nothing too fancy there. It hasn't really crept around this edge, so that's quite easy just to smash on the return. Everything has been wire wheeled to buggery. These welds I'm not going to clean up. Well, these aren't welds, these are the back of these welds, but I'm not bothered about them. They're on the inner arch, and once there's underseal on there, you're not going to see it. If you're really, really fussy, I guess you could clean it up, but doing anything inside that inner arch is a pain in the ass. It might be a bit easier on a ramp, but on the floor, it's just not fun putting your head up in there. So yeah, they're just going to get left. The inner arch lip, I've actually trimmed. I've probably only taken off about 3 or 4 mil, so it'll probably come out to about here, but I've trimmed that right back, because like I said to you in the first video, I want to try and gain as much clearance as possible. So I've also been looking at this thinking, well, once that's welded on there, how the hell do you get any sort of cavity wax between these two seams? You have this bung here, which is like a factory hole, but I mean, you have got a bung here, which you could get wax in there, but it's not going to really travel, I don't think, down past that. I think it's going to get stuck there. And then this side, you have got the factory holes where the side trim goes in. I think there's one more here, maybe. I can't remember if it's got 3 or 4 on here. Anyway, I think there's 4. But yeah, you're never going to get any wax between the 2 seams, which is where you're going to weld. So what I've done is I have drilled an extra hole, which goes through to the inner arch, if you can see that. There it is. And the idea with that is once this is all welded, I can then basically put a rubber tube through the inner arch to land in here and just coat this whole thing with cavity wax to stop the same thing happening, you know, what happened to the last repair. Obviously the last repair, it was probably done to a body shop standard, but body shop standards aren't all that, you know, in my experience. It's very hit and miss what you get. But there was no cavity wax in there, and if they cavity waxed it, it probably wouldn't have rotted quite as bad as what it did. So I want to try and prevent that, because obviously when you cut apart a section like that, or like we've done, it's just going to rot again if you don't protect it. Like this weld through primer, as much as it says, yeah, stops rust, blah blah blah, it doesn't stop rust. It helps eliminate bare metal surfaces whilst you're welding. But once you've welded, you know, you're going to melt the paint. There's going to be all sorts of oxidation and stuff that happens, science that I don't understand. But this is only going to do so much. So you need to follow up with a bit of cavity wax between your seams of metal. And so many times on so many cars I've had where you've seen people do repairs and stuff, the issue is 9 out of 10, they've done the repair okay, or like it would pass, you know, and last, but they don't put any cavity wax. So cavity wax, kids. And if you watch my touring jacking point video, you'll have seen as soon as I welded that, I filled the cavities with wax and spilled it everywhere, admittedly. But yeah, we need to cavity wax. So if you can imagine, once this lip is welded to here, you know, what are we going to do? There's just, you're not going to be able to paint in between those seams. So if we can get some cavity wax in there, then, you know, anything is a help at this point. So what's next? Well, we've got to prep this panel. So I'm just going to knock back, because these are galvanised, so I'm going to knock back 1/2 inch all the way around, just to get any of the swarf off from where I've cut it, and also take the galv coating off the top. That's the first plan of attack. Same goes for on the inside lip. I'm going to figure out, I'm only going to do a handful of spot welds, you know, just 3 or 4. But anyway, where I'm going to do a spot weld, I'm going to drill that, knock back the galv coating, and then reapply a bit of our weld through. So that's the plan. Obviously we've got to run a few spot welds along this lip as well. So we've done, we've knocked off this excess zinc coating on the edges, done that back and front, and I figured I need to make a decision here where this is getting trimmed in relation to the sill and stuff. And I've got a bit of an issue, not a massive issue. I'm just trying to get my head around it. So if you can imagine, all of this fits lovely. As you can see, there's your swage lines. Obviously this, you know, it's a pattern part, but height wise that should be pretty good. So we know that this line is pretty accurate. I've taken a measurement from the other side, from this little seam here down to the top of this, and it's within 1 mil of the other side. So I'm happy that this position is right. The issue I've got though is on this side, there's 2 things I need to be careful of. One is the position, how far in this gets welded, because obviously if I slam it back there, you're going to have a weird curve on the back of the sill, and if it's too far out, it's not going to line up here. So I've had a look, there's a car outside, I've got another 36 vert, and if I put a straight edge against this sill, there is a natural curvature on the back of the sill where this comes in slightly. So if you put a straight edge along that, sat on this sort of swage line, follow it along from here, this probably pushes into about there roughly. And you can probably see the issue I've got is that you can still see the inner arch lip, you know, behind this sill panel. I can't just bang that right up against there. Even if I did, it doesn't cover it enough. I could trim this right back, but then there wouldn't be much of an arch lip, which doesn't seem right. And I know this inner arch is correct, because before I replaced this upper piece, I replaced the bottom bit when I did the inner sill. So I know that sort of this end is perfect because it was made off what was there already, and then obviously this follows that. So I'm like scratching my head and I'm like, what if the original arch lip is much thicker? And this came off a convertible that I broke up, and you can see the thickness in arch lip is like probably a third again, which would be the difference of covering that piece up. So as you can see, like this one we've got just under 20 mil. This one is more like, I don't know, 27 mil. I mean, you can just see the inner arch lip starting to protrude away from it. So yeah, these pattern parts, whilst the actual arch itself looks good, that I'm not quite happy with, because yeah, it's not right. I mean, look, would a normal E36 owner care? Maybe not, but it's got to be right. So there's no chance this is wrong. You know, this has got to be 95% spot on as per OEM in terms of sizing and stuff. It might be very slightly thinner or wide or whatever, but there's no more room to modify that. We could slightly trim this top edge, I guess, but it's this piece here which is bugging me, because you're going to see that. So yeah, I'm not really happy with that. And knowing that I've got this cut here, which we need for this swage line, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, we've got this return here. So I think what I need to do, I'm not really too fussed about this lower piece, because most of that covers up, and obviously the skirt will sit on there. But I think this edge just needs extending slightly. It needs sort of a 10mm strip adding to it, so it adequately covers that inner arch, so it looks right basically. And I've had a look on the other side, which isn't really a good reference because it's covered in filler. Well, what I think is filler, because it's been repaired before. But the convertible outside has got original arches, and yeah, similarly like this, they're quite wide. So I think I just need to add some material. Probably, you know, I'll just blend it from here, add a 10mm strip, and then I can get that sat, which I think it needs to land about there, give or take. So another 10mm. Yeah, maybe I could take a little bit off this and find a middle ground. But yeah, so a bit of a bugger, to be honest. And then we're just looking at, obviously I've got this sill panel, which if you're using a saloon sill, it wouldn't be a problem generally, because your sill would come all the way along here and you could just cut off the top edge. But because this car was rotten into the quarter panel, I had to cut this way higher. Like at the front, I just cut the outer sill off on this line. But on this car, because there was rot up to here, I had to go much higher. Which meant the saloon sill wouldn't really work for this, because obviously it's got a recess where the door would go. Hence why I think I bought this cheap from a friend, because I knew I'd have to butcher this anyway. So what I'm basically thinking of doing is I'm going to cut this off here. I know this reference point and this end of the sill is good, or besides the inner arch cover piece, that's fine. But this is good. So I'm going to cut that out, and then I basically need to create a fillet from this donor cut. So we've got like yeah, we're going to cut probably to the top of here, or just to the underside of here, and then we're going to come up to say there and drop that piece into here. Hopefully get a nice clean line on it. Now it shouldn't be too much of a problem, because as I say, we've got this end to refer to and this end to refer to. Now I was tempted to actually come back to here and ignore this line. So if the line is very slightly off, you're not going to see it. But saying that, the actual side skirts on the facelift cars, basically the trim sits to there, so you don't really see it anyway. It's just, again, it would be nice to make sure it's kind of in there right. Yeah, I haven't decided yet. I'm either going to come right back and knock it in, or just come here. I'm kind of tempted now I think about it to bring this right back here, cut this off here, lose that, because obviously the pressing is very slightly different. That's got a softer. It's just me being really fussy, and I probably don't need to be, but you're doing it once, let's do it right. So yeah, fun stuff. Anyway, the long and short of it is, I need to chop some of this out of here. I need to chop some of this out of here, get that tacked in place there. Then I need to extend this inner sill or outer sill to cover the inner sill. Drill some spot welds on here, trim this arch lip back, and then I might modify or trim the outer sill to fit, and make sure before I send any of this for welding, like send it home, everything actually tacks together, because there's a lot of pieces here and I want to make sure fitment is good, or as close to good as can be. So yeah, it's a bit scratchy head moment, this. There's a lot to wrap your head around all at once, but yeah, I think I've got a game plan. And a lot of this, if you're watching this and you've done this sort of stuff before, you probably think, oh, I'm overthinking it. And to be honest, I probably am. I'm probably trying to be, like, go too far and trying to make it too perfect. But like I say, I'll just, in my head, it has to be done right. If it's not done right, then it's going to piss me off. So yeah, I need to get it right. So yeah, we're going to get all this trimmed up. I'm probably going to spend the next hour fettling, trimming stuff, and once I've got it all where I want it, I'll bring you back in. So first piece to extend this, what I've done is cut a random bit off the top of the seal we don't need, and then clamp the seal in place roughly where I think it's going to land, and then I've tucked that piece in between the inner and outer seal, inner and outer arch, and I've just marked down it with a pen because it's not a straight edge. So I'll cut that edge off, and then that should weld nicely onto this, and then I just need to trim off the excess, which I can probably, once I've cut this, put it behind the inner seal and mark the inner seal back edge, and that should fall quite nicely. We are nearly there, I think, almost ready to weld on. So we have ever so slightly trimmed this arch lip, but not a great deal. I just took a bit off this top edge really, but that's pretty much as it was. The actual outer arch panel, I've done a fair bit of work to it, so drilled spot welds for everywhere that it's going to be spot welded, and then X primed it, or weld through primed it on the back. You can see there I've got a few spot welds, and then what I've done is extended this arch lip and then trimmed it, so it's about 30mm deep, as per the original, wherever that is, or the donor cut that I had. So that should be pretty happy. We've also got this little guy which is gonna add the original swage line back into our car, so that's gonna live there. So that's happy. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack this onto this first, because we know as long as that's parallel to that, that then brings that line down slightly, get everything roughly in place, and then we're going to tack this outer seal on, so I can still move the lower piece in and out as required. I have trimmed some of this lip back, taken about a third of it off, so we've got a bit more clearance, but we need to just fine tune the depth and also fine tune this angle here. So I think if I get it connected all around the top edge, and then I can bring it in and out as required. There's not going to be a great deal of movement in it, because obviously the depth is set by where it lands on this seal, but yeah, I'm just making sure I've got a little bit of movement before I fully send it home. So I'll get that tacked in, and then I think it's time to trim the seal piece, tack that on, and just make sure everything comes together nicely before I put any seam welds in it. If I start seam welding it and make a hash of it, then obviously it's not more work to undo. Okay, so that's all now tacked in place. Very happy with that so far. Fitment's good. These magnets, for anyone wondering, are actually sign making magnets. I used to work in a sign company, a wrap business, so I had a whole load of these for when you wrap cars. Turns out they're actually really good. They're super strong, as you've seen. Like, you know, they take a fair bit of force to pull off. They're actually really good for this sort of welding, and completely unplanned, but yeah, they've turned out pretty good every time I've used them. You can buy the big magnets specifically for welding, but I find sometimes they're almost too heavy. Yeah, they're a bit clunky. These are really strong, they've got good surface area, and they're really light. So yeah, they work really well, and as you can see, when I'm just trying to pull gaps together or close, whatever, you can put it on there and just tweak it slightly by actually pulling it, which works out pretty well. I mean, you can see how strong it is. That panel will actually, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but yeah, it's good. It's very good. So they've come in really well, or really handy, as you've probably just seen. So that's all looking pretty good. I'm happy with that so far. I'm at this stage now, I think the next job is get this lower sill piece just trimmed up, roughly fitted, so I can just make sure that I've got the angle of the dangle right on here. Obviously I probably could start seam welding this in, because there is still plenty of give in all of that, so I might just crack on, to be honest. So you can see, even with this fully welded, I'd be able to bring this in or out. I can feel the inner arch, it seems to follow that sort of shape lovely. So that's good. All of this seems to be sitting pretty nicely. And then yeah, this piece here, I've got to do a little bit fettling on that corner, but you know, I can tweak that as I need, depending on how I want to sit it on this inner arch lip. So yeah, pretty happy with that, to be honest. So yeah, I think if anything, I'm actually just going to crack on and start getting this welded. Sick. That's now welded on. Pretty happy with that, to be honest. Doesn't seem to have distorted too much. I think my panel gap here was a bit too tight. There's a tiny bit of distortion, I think. We'll know more once I flap it down and get it smoothed. But yeah, pretty happy with that. First time I've ever done full arch, so all a learning curve. But yeah, pretty happy generally. I don't know. I need to finish off down here. We'll do that in a minute once I've made some space. Get that finished off. I'm going to knock all of this off with a flat wheel now and just see what we're left with. But yeah, pretty happy with that. Right, my peeps, arch is done, which is mega. So off camera, I've just basically attacked it with a flat wheel to get it relatively flat. I don't know how flat is acceptable, but what I'm trying to do is take the top of the weld off, so that it could be smoothed over with filler, but not attack the metal so much that you're thinning it, weakening it, and running the risk of blowing through it. So that's kind of where I've left that. So pretty happy generally. First time doing this, but yeah, seems pretty good. This is all done. This is sort of bowed out slightly, but I'm not too worried because that outer skin, it's got to go on, and then obviously I can pull that in as I sort of tack weld it together. So that's fine. We've still got these spot welds to do, but like I say, we need to get this lower arch, lower sill piece on and see where that sits, and then that'll tell me how far in this needs to be pulled in. I think it's just going to land there, but I'd rather just check before I send it and weld it. So yeah, all of that's good. These spot welds won't take long to weld, which is great, but yeah, we've still got the filler neck to do, which is, you know, a fair job in itself. Because that's, you know, pretty high up, we don't want that to distort, blah blah blah. But yeah, generally some good progress. So I think I'm gonna knock this video here, because it's a pretty big step to actually have an arch on, and then we'll probably do one final weldathon video to get the sides or the skirt piece on, the lower sill, because that's not a great deal of work, I don't think. It's basically just one big piece that just needs trimming to size. And then we've got this, what do you call it? Whatever this is, filler neck to sort out. So, but we've done the bulk of the work already. We know that fits. We could probably just have a look at that now we've got the actual arch on. Might have to do a bit more fettling. That's going to live in there like so. Shows you how much the metal moves, because that fitted up there lovely before and it now doesn't. So we're going to have to make that fit again, I guess. We'll just take a bit of metal off the top here, and then obviously fettle this once we've made this piece. But yeah, it's coming along pretty well. I'm pretty stoked to actually be at this stage at long last, even though it's taken months and months and months to get here. But yeah, it feels good to almost be across the line with this part anyway. Obviously you've still got the whole underside which needs cleaning up, like properly clean up, and underbody coating. There's loads of random bits that need looking at, like there I've knocked back a bit of rust. Both the floors, I think we're going to go to town. The plan is basically get the car rolling by the end of the month, which I don't know if that's possible, but that's kind of the deadline I set myself. But really, just having the arch, inner and outer arch done is like the big job sort of ticked off. So it would be really nice to get this finished next week, which I should be able to. That's the plan anyway. So yeah, I think we're on track for that, which is amazing. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this. I'm kind of losing the will with this car, but to see it at this stage is pretty epic. So I got to admit, I'm pretty chuffed. And obviously, like doing stuff I've never done before, never welded a full arch. So this was an interesting one, and not just a full arch, an inner, like proper inner chop out and replace the filler neck, and cutting up a car that had already had welding and fab work done. So like what you're working with isn't perfect. But yeah, I'm pretty stoked to be, or actually have done it, which is epic. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't, please subscribe. As I said in the last video, I'm trying to hit 1,000 subs by Christmas. So let's see how this goes. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.